In southern Madagascar, famine-like conditions have doubled the number of people in need of humanitarian assistance compared with last year to more than 1.3 million. The World Food Programme said successive droughts and lack of jobs linked to COVID-19 restrictions are to blame. The situation has forced people to eat whatever they can find, cactus mixed with mud, roots, whatever they can find, leaves, seeds, whatever is available. The United Nations chief issued a call for an inclusive, transparent and peaceful election process across Uganda a day ahead of the polls opening. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres raised concern over reports of violence and tensions in parts of the country and implored all political actors and their supporters to refrain from the use of hate speech, intimidation and violence. He said in a statement, any electoral disputes should be resolved through legal and peaceful means. Italy's ruling coalition collapsed after former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi withdrew support over the country's economic recovery plans. Renzi announced in a press conference that his Italia Viva party was resigning from government. The small centrist party had 2 ministers. It also means the ruling coalition no longer has a majority in parliament. His announcement plunged the country, Europe's most heavily impacted by the pandemic, into a new political crisis. As Portugal assumes the presidency of the European Union (EU), to be followed by Slovenia later this year, the UN Refugee Agency (UNHCR) called on them to lead the effort to forge a better protection system for those seeking refuge across the continent and beyond. Gonzalo Vargas Llosa, UNHCR's representative for EU affairs, also called for reform to be central during negotiations over a new EU pact on migration and asylum and highlighted the importance of an EU that saves lives, protects refugees in Europe and globally, and finds solutions to end forced displacement and build resilient societies is needed more than ever. A new amendment to the Saudi anti-harassment law enabling the naming and shaming of convicted sexual predators will deter potential offenders and protect victims. The change to the original 2018 law was approved by the Cabinet, adding the publication of an offender's personal details to the previously applicable punishments of fines and imprisonment. A royal decree was issued to amend the anti-harassment law, allowing the judge handling the case to include the sentence imposed on the harasser to name and shame him on his own financial expense as a deterrent to him and others like him. A first round of new exploratory talks between Turkey and Greece will take place this month, following Ankara's offer to discuss conflicting territorial claims in the Eastern Mediterranean. The talks are set to take place in Istanbul on January 25th. It will be the 61st round of exploratory talks to be held in the past 14 years, while previous meetings mainly focused on issues related to the Aegean Sea. Athens is expected to focus discussions on maritime zones in the Aegean and East Med in line with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, while Ankara has not set any preconditions for the talks. Researchers worldwide must make greater efforts to work together to quickly identify new variants of SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. The plea came during a virtual gathering of more than 1,750 scientists from 124 countries, which was convened by the World Health Organization (WHO) on Wednesday to discuss critical knowledge gaps and research priorities relating to emerging mutations of the virus. Since the start of the pandemic, WHO has been routinely investigating and evaluating whether new variants spread more easily, increase the severity of the disease, or reduce the effectiveness of treatments and vaccines. New York City will terminate business contracts with President Donald Trump after last week's insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that Trump Organization earns about $17 million a year in profits from its contracts to run 2 ice skating rinks and a castle in Central Park, as well as a golf course in the Bronx. The city can legally terminate a contract if the leadership of a company is engaged in criminal activity. The Bahraini Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Tourism and the U.S. Department of Commerce signed a memorandum of understanding to promote bilateral business by establishing an American trade zone in Bahrain. The new zone is aimed at boosting economic, commercial and industrial cooperation between the two countries, the Bahraini news agency BNA reported. Under the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, the U.S. and Bahrain will promote the zone as a regional hub for trade, manufacturing, logistics, and distribution among American companies in Bahrain, the GCC, and beyond. According to the Emirati Ministry of Health and Prevention, the number of generic medicines and drugs available in the UAE now totals 6,176. 16 factories are involved in the production of pharmaceuticals and medical items in the country. The ministry said such numbers clearly reflect the flexible and attractive legislation and investment environment and the availability of experiences, research capabilities, initiatives, and incentives that help establish competitive medical and pharmaceutical industries. Ryanair and Virgin Atlantic have been rated the worst airlines for customer service by people who tried to get a refund after their flight was cancelled. Both airlines scored abysmally low in a survey conducted by Which Travel, with 8 out of 10 customers saying they were dissatisfied with the refund service they received after their flight was cancelled in 2020. Millions of flights were grounded in 2020 as a result of the coronavirus crisis, leaving people fighting for refunds, which they are legally entitled to receive within 7 days of cancellation. Mealworms may soon find their into Europe's pasta bowls and dinner dishes after becoming the first insect approved in the region as a human food. The decision came by the European Food Safety Agency, paves the way for the yellow grubs to be used whole and dries in curries and other recipes and as a flour to make biscuits, pasta and bread. Despite their name, mealworms are beetle larvae rather than worms and are already used in Europe as a pet food ingredient. Megalodon was the biggest predatory shark that ever lived, and its young were also gargotten. At birth, they were as big as the average basketball player. A new study published online on January 11th in the journal Historical Biology suggested the megalodon's babies promoted by their growth by gobbling up their smaller siblings while still in the mother's womb, a survival strategy shared by some modern sharks. During this study, a U.S. research team calculated the size of megalodon babies by analyzing skeletal fossils of a megalodon that measured about 30 feet, which is 9 meters long when it died. During the Lunar New Year celebrations, most Singaporeans exchange monetary gifts known as Hungabao, which come in the form of new banknotes placed in red envelopes. However, the Central Bank of Singapore seeks to replace this popular tradition with an eco-friendly one by encouraging people to give digital gifts instead of the traditional banknotes. The German news agency reported that the step aims to reduce queues in banks and emissions generated by printing millions of new banknotes for this occasion. There can be a few museums in the world to rival the National Museum of Niger. It has displays covering art, history, dinosaurs, nuclear energy, craft work, and music, as well as live animals, for it also a zoo. Its clientele is similarly diverse, encompassing visitors who have trekked to the capital Niamey for across the country. School groups will heed foreign tourists and street urchins. At least 50 countries committed to protecting 30% of the planet, including land and sea, over the next decade to halt species extinction and address climate change issues during the Global Summit Monday aimed at protecting the world's biodiversity. About 30 leaders, government officials, and heads of international organizations participated in the One Planet Summit, which was being held by video conference because of the coronavirus pandemic. Top U.S. officials were notably absent, as there were leaders of Russia, India, and Brazil.